All right, everyone, thanks so much for being here today for another Smith.ai Masters Series webinar. I am Maddy Martin. I'm the VP of Marketing at Smith.ai. We are a 24/7 virtual receptionist and web chat service for solo and small businesses. We handle your calls, chats, texts, and Facebook messages, handling lead screening, scheduling, intake, payments, you name it, a whole lot more than just transferring calls. And today we've got Adam Steele here from Loginix, and he's going to be talking about SEO link building fundamentals, which is a really interesting and sort of challenging subject for a lot of people, including a lot of marketers who've been very successful in other things, but just can't crack that nut. So Adam is going to be talking to us about basically going through answers to really common questions and stumbling blocks with link building. So, first of all, why? Secondly, what are the fundamentals to build a good foundation for any link building program or campaigns? What do you need to understand before getting started? Then he's also going to go through what does a typical link building campaign look like? How do you do outreach? How do you build it out? And what sort of results can you expect it to yield? And then what are the common pitfalls to avoid? So, things to definitely not do from past misses or missteps or mistakes that many of us have done. And then finally, what opportunities exist to really differentiate your brand and optimize these link building campaigns? Because so often, they're done at high volume and not a lot of attention to detail is paid, which can impact the results. So without further ado, Adam, can you just share a little bit about yourself before we get into the presentation and your role and what Loginix does?
So my name is Adam Steele. I'm from Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada. I started Loginix in 2010. Loginix.com is a SEO provider to agencies and in-house teams. We help agencies and in-house teams with link building or SEO reporting, putting together an audit, for example. We do a lot of local search stuff. So citation building, for example, that is submitting to local business directories and whatnot. And all that is available in a nice and tidy dashboard, which keeps everything sort of organized and whatnot. We are a distributed team. That is, we are located everywhere. And we were that way pre-pandemic times and certainly will continue to do so. So we've got folks all over the globe. And yeah, I think that's pretty well it.
All right, awesome. Well, we're really excited to learn from you, Adam. So yeah, let's sort of just get started on why link building and what is it. So for a small business, let's use the example of an HVAC company, a service-based company, high value services, maybe localized, maybe not. Maybe there's a pretty large footprint. Could be financial advisor or could be only in a metro region, for example.
Cool. So I guess let's go back to what Google is. So Google is a search engine, and how things appear in Google isn't by random. There is an algorithm that dictates which websites show where, in what order, for each individual search phrase that you type in. And so it's an SEO's job to understand how that algorithm works to the best of our ability. Google certainly doesn't come out and say, if you do this, you will rank high. So we've got to do a lot of trial and error to figure out, how much emphasis to put on, say, link building, for example, or how much emphasis to put on what we do on site. So how, our content on our website or our title tags or meta tags or all that kind of stuff. We have to figure out for ourselves how to weigh each sort of piece of the puzzle. And so as it happens, link building, for as long as I have been doing SEO, which goes back to 2010, has been a big part of Google's algorithm. It has helped websites, or rather how strong you are with your link building very much determines how well you rank in Google. And it just happens that it's a, if I mentioned the piece of a puzzle, we could call it pie. It's a big chunk of the pie. How much, I don't know, but if I'm allocating budget, if I'm allocating marketing budget to all the various SEO tasks, I am putting a very big chunk in link building, larger than just about every other chunk, if I'm being honest. So it's really important. And so what is it exactly? It's essentially a link from another website to your website. That might be in a piece of content. That might just be, on a resources page. It could be in the form of a testimonial. It's purely a link from one website to your website. And ideally, it's from a website that Google trusts in for some reason. And trust is can be given to a website because it's been around a long time. So let's say it's been around for 10 years. That website, typically speaking, if it's been active, if it's been contributing value to the internet, it tends to become trusted. And the way link building works is if one trusted source links to another source, basically by extension, Google now trusts that new source. So they trusted the website that's doing the linking, and that website now links to the other website. And like I said, by extension, because Google trusted the website that's doing the linking, it now, it's not a perfect science or anything, but it now trusts or has a little bit more trust for the website that received the link. And so that's why we do it. We do it to build trust on a website so that Google will send its valuable users to our website or to our client's website. And their users are everything, right? Without their users, they have no monetization strategy. So it's very important to them to get this algorithm right. And if link building is a big part of that, then it's really important that they do a good job of determining what is a trusted link or not, which we'll talk a lot about today.
Great. Okay. So do you want to go into next sort of the fundamentals of finding those trusted sites, or where's your normal starting point when you're working with a new client?
Yeah, that's a good question. We could go right into trust. We could also go into, I think that's probably the most natural next step. And then maybe we could come back to, figuring out the natural next step for a client when we onboard a client or what have you. So trust, as I mentioned, is determined by a lot of things. Like I said, age is an example. But remember, we talked about how one website links to another. So one of the big ways that websites gain trust is when lots of other trusted websites link to them. So we talked about that trusted website earlier, that link to that new website. Well, that trusted website is a trusted website because a lot of times they have a lot of other trusted websites linking to them. And so that's one of the indicators for us as folks that are looking to acquire links for our clients. That's sort of one of the indicators of value, of it being worth, say, contacting that website in order to get a link from that website is we've used a tool like Ahrefs, like SEMrush, like many of the different SEO tools, I suppose, that exist out there. We use a tool like that to give us some insight into which sites and of what quality are those sites linked to other websites that we might want to link on. So it gives us, there are millions, billions of websites out there. So we can't reach out to all of them. It would make no sense to get a link on all of them. So we use certain indicators like who links to the website we're interested in getting a link on, to create priority, to determine whether or not it's worth our time and in what order we should reach out to this website. So a lot of it can be drummed up to just who links to that website and what are the quality of the websites that link to that website. And then you could go, well, what are the quality of those links that link to that website? And then so on and so forth. So it can get, it can be a very arduous task, which is why we have a lot of other sort of indicators of value, which I can go through right now. And I think that sort of leads us nicely into our backlink quality checklist.
Okay, great. And just before we get started into that, Adam, as we're talking about links, obviously different things can be linked. Are you talking about literally a URL, a text-based link, an image link, a video that's linked? What sort of links? Is it all under the sun?
Yeah, I would be hard pressed to say that, you know, this one link is worth more than this other type of link. Like an image link is worth less than what we might call a contextual link or an in-content link. I've never. Yeah, I've never seen any evidence to say one is worth more than the other. I think in general, we just try and get what would appear to be the most natural. And a lot of times, when I say most natural, I mean sort of most naturally occurring, most least forced, what would appear to be
organic.
Yeah, you know, we'll get into this later, but in SEO, there is a lot of not so good behavior, or at least not so good as determined by Google. Whether it's good or bad is up to you. But it's important that your links look naturally occurring, like it wasn't forced, like it wasn't paid for, like it wasn't well, like it isn't unnatural. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, and I think, you know, just for everyone here, what Adam is talking about with sort of the in context links is when you're reading a paragraph and there's a few words, a phrase that are linked, typically not just one word, sometimes one word, often a phrase. And that phrase relates to the linked page or maybe even a home page of a website. And that seems to naturally flow or is expected in the context. So let's say you're, you know, introducing a new paragraph and you say 2 out of 3 potential clients base their decision to hire a law firm on their initial responsiveness to a lead's call, right? Something that I cite really often. If I'm writing that paragraph, I would link, you know, the decision to hire or that whole statistic to the Clio legal trends report that I'm citing. And that's often a way that we think about context, even in a help article situation. Oh, you want to learn more about the sales funnel. Well, this article is going to go through how to calculate your conversion rate and this and this and this, right? Conversion rate might link off to its own page dedicated to that topic. That would be a link. Now, if you link off to another site, that's considered a backlink or link building. Is that right, Adam?
Exactly. And I can pull up a couple just sort of more visual examples by sharing my screen here. Let's see if I can make this happen. Share. Can you see my screen all right?
Yep.
Wonderful. Okay. So here is something from your blog. And so right here, this is what we would call an internal link. So this is a link to one of your own pages. Whereas, how's the size of the font? Is it visible? Is it? Okay, wonderful. Whereas here's what we call an external link. So one pointing externally to another website. And this one points to Google. So their Google Keyword Planner. So it's most common what you're going to see, or at least I find most common, would be a link like this. It would be a link in a piece of content, most often on the blog, but not necessarily. It could be on a service page or a product page, or it could be a lot of things. But in a blog post like this is very, very common. And this is most often what we're after, is making, is just creating opportunities like this in existing content or in new content, which we'll get into a little bit later. So here's a perfect example. Like, here's a link to, whoa, this one's to us.
There you go.
There you go. So, wow, of course, I wrote this one.
There you go.
I didn't plan that at all, believe it or not. So, okay, well, there you go. Wonderful. So I will get into how to make opportunities like this happen, or try how to try to make opportunities like this happen in a little bit. But what we're going to talk about right now is backlink quality. So we were talking about trust earlier. Goodness, this is a big spreadsheet. I don't know that I'm going to even be able to pull it all up without having to do some scrolling left and right. So you'll have to forgive me here. So we were talking about trust earlier. And one of the ways that I determine trust is who links to that website. So, do websites that I know, that I trust for real brands, real businesses, do they link to the website that I'm interested in getting a link on? So, if I was to look at Smith.ai, for example, I already know that Smith.ai is a brand that I recognize. It is a real business. It has a real community. It has real engagement online, both on the website in sort of terms of like comments, but also within social. And these are all things that kind of validate in my mind whether this is a website that I can trust, a website that Google would trust. But that's not always the case. I won't always be looking at Smith.ai or a website that I know of, a brand that I know of. Sometimes I have to do some research, and we talked before about using a tool like Ahrefs or SEMrush to look up backlinks. And that's helpful. That's a big piece. That's super, super important. However, there are a lot of other things that we need to look for as well. And we need to understand that I often break this down into qualitative and quantitative, we'll call them metrics, or determiners of quality. And quantitative are usually numbers. So in SEO, we have a lot of different metrics that we rely on, numerical metrics that we rely on to indicate whether a website is quality or not. They are third-party metrics, one must understand. That is, they are not metrics that Google says are good or not. So if we talk about something like DA, or domain authority, or DR, which is domain rating, or even websites like Ahrefs, for example, I'll mention them a lot, which give us some sort of estimate of the organic traffic, that is traffic from Google that a website receives, is not perfect either. It's not, Google's not telling Ahrefs how much traffic a website is receiving. Ahrefs is making a calculated guess based on formulas and et cetera, et cetera. But these are things that scale. And by that, I mean, a lot of folks may just be looking at one or two or three websites and trying to determine quality. However, we have to do things at scale. We're looking at dozens, hundreds, thousands of websites at the same time. And so quantitative metrics that are numerical, help us very quickly determine whether a website is likely to be quality or not at scale. So those are sort of the quantitative side of the coin. There's also a qualitative side of the coin, which are things that aren't easily, they're not numbers. So we talked about brand. I can't quantify brand. We talked about whether there is engagement on the website or via social. That's pretty hard to quantify. So it's another qualitative metric. How does the website look? Is it appealing? Does it look like it was thrown together in 10 seconds? Or does it look like a labor of love? Is it something they, hired a designer for, et cetera? I can't quantify those things. And so I call those qualitative metrics. And they too help me determine the quality of a website and whether it is trusted by Google or not. Again, the qualitative metrics are not something Google gives me. Google doesn't say, yes, this is a good looking design. I have to determine that for myself. And it's a very subjective thing, which is why you'll see that this list is long. I can't just depend on a handful of things that I think might be a trust factor in Google's eyes. If Google told me these 5 things were a trust factor, then I might be able to just depend on those 5 things. But that's not really the case. So I have to depend on many, both subjective and objective, qualitative and quantitative metrics to help determine whether a website is worth getting a link on, which in most cases is what it means to me whether or not I'm going to be reaching out, sending an email, finding email information, so contact information on a website, which takes time and costs money. So again, this is all about prioritizing how much time I spend reaching out to websites or trying to get links. So what we did for our team in order to scale this, and for a lot of folks, like I said, a lot of folks are only looking for 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 links. So they may not need something quite so rigorous. However, if you want to be real sure that you're getting something of quality, and you might want to be, even if you're doing it at a small scale, you might want to be, because remember we talked about how there is sort of good and bad, and how some websites you don't want to link from because they're maybe engaging in shady behavior. And we talked about how users are Google's lifeblood. If Google doesn't have its users, Google has nothing. And so if Google's sending their users to crappy websites, Google's going to lose those users, and then they don't have a way to monetize. So it's really important that they send their users to good websites. Now, how does that come back to the trust piece? Well, if they aren't able to determine trust, if they aren't able to determine whether a website is acting in sort of a high quality, user-centric way, if that website isn't treating their users with, I don't know, we'll use the word respect, then they're not going to want to send users to that website. In fact, they may go so far as penalizing that website in a way. And I won't get into the whole penalization stuff because that's very, very complicated, and that's its own topic on its own. It's many topics on its own. But what I'm trying to emphasize is not every website can be trusted, and we don't want links from every website, because if they get penalized and we get a link on their website, we may be at risk as well because we have a link from a penalized website. It's not, if this, then that. It's not, 100% or anything. It's not, if a website is penalized and we have a link from it, we're definitely getting penalized. It isn't like that, but it's something we need to be aware of when we are looking for links, when we are looking for link opportunities. And again, that's why I put together such an exhaustive list here, is because there's a lot of upside, but there's also downside, and we have to be aware of that. So I don't think I will go through this entire sheet, because explaining every single one of these individual I guess criteria or metrics would probably take a very long time. But some of them are more advanced So understanding whether a website has a DNS or a record, that's a little bit more advanced, and it's something that can be done at scale and automated. So I put it here because this is something that we do. And what we do is we explain what it is. So not everybody's going to understand what that is, why it matters, and how to check. And a lot of times we are going to link out to the tools that we use to figure this out. And if we don't do that, we'll link out to blog posts on our own website where we go into depth on each of these different criteria. There's also actually, this whole checklist began with a blog post. And so it's linked here. And I'm going to be sharing this sheet with everyone. You'll have a link to it. So don't worry about writing anything down or trying to remember anything. Everybody will receive this. There are, as I mentioned, a lot of things. We talked about different quantitative metrics like DR and DA, domain rating and domain authority. And so again, these are third-party metrics. And I sort of set a basis, like it should be at least 10 plus. It's a scale of 0 to 100. So it should be at the very least 10 plus. The DA should be at least 10 plus, and so on and so forth. So we give you sort of a place to start there. A lot of times these metrics aren't available to folks for free because these, Ahrefs is a paid for service. Moz.com is a paid for service. However, if you sign up for our dashboard, it is free. The dashboard is free, and we do have a tool that gives you all of these metrics. So there is a way to get it for free, and there's other folks' websites that offer the same. So Ahrefs and Moz may not offer them, but you can find lookups, metric lookups is what they would be called, for free if you search around or in our dashboard. So this stuff isn't impossible to get. And like I said, this stuff scales real well. It's an easy way of determining quality at scale. History and trends. So this is kind of something where you would need to lean on tools for, because you're not going to be able to know how many links a website got in a given month, or how little, or how much traffic they had last month versus this month. And some of these tools are very useful for looking for sort of peaks and valleys. And some trends are not so good. So, we might see traffic go all the way down, or fall off a cliff. And that is an indicator of maybe this website isn't going to be this website isn't going to be as trusted tomorrow as it is today, or in a week as it is today, or in a month as it is today. And we want links from websites that are increasing in trust, that are doing something that is making them more trustworthy in Google's eyes, and thus Google may be sending them more organic traffic as a result, because that's, they're saying this is trusted and we want to send our users there. We get into more of the manual stuff. So we always do a manual content review. And a very quick way of doing this is just pulling up a website's last 10 blog posts or last 5 blog posts, assuming they have a blog, and having a look at how the content reads. Does it read like someone spent some time on it? Is it 100 words? Is it 1,000 words? Does it, read well? Like somebody, did spend some time editing it. Who do they link out to? Are they linking out to gambling sites, for example? Well, that might not be good, because, those tend to be sites that are doing things that are not sort of above board so far as Google is concerned. And so how websites write their content, how they promote their content, are all things that we should be sort of aware of. Another thing that we look for is whether or not they're links look natural. Their external links look natural. Do they look like they were paid for? Do they look like they were kind of forced, if that makes sense? For example, let me give you a perfect example. We talked about the HVAC example earlier.
Mhm.
Would a website naturally hyperlink text? So link out by hyperlinking words. And would they hyperlink something like San Antonio best AC repair? Probably not. That sounds kind of forced, right? And so that's that versus something like AC repair tips, which is probably, it may seem a little bit forced too, but it's definitely way less forced than the first one I mentioned, right? So you're looking for sort of natural linking as well.
Mm-hmm.
So as I mentioned, there are a lot of things to go through here. We've not sort of rated it in importance. You know, I can't say that this one is more important than this one, and this one is more important than this one. We don't know that. So instead, we just try to look at as many as possible, or just pick the ones that are most sort of easily accessed. So this
Adam,
is useful.
let me, yeah, I mean, this is incredibly useful. I'm sure a lot of people are overwhelmed a little bit by this, if not a lot, but you know, when you start to drill down and you think, okay, in terms of my budget and resources and timing, like if we look at the domain rank and the domain authority, is it advisable to go with sort of a shorter list with maybe more time spent on higher domain rank sites where they're, you know, sort of heavy hitters that when you get it, it's going to maybe have a bigger impact? Or would you just say all the ones that we can possibly get, you know, from a, you know, 10 plus domain rank are largely just as valuable?
Good point. Yes, generally speaking, something with higher, say, domain rating is more worthwhile of your time. And so if you had to send emails to 1,000 websites, I would sort those websites by something like DR and reach out to the highest DR first. Now that, well, it's not a perfect science, because the bigger the site, the more mail email they typically receive, and the higher bar of entry they typically have. And so you may reach out to 100 of the highest DR on your list and not hear back. But if you had written to, say, medium DR in your list, you may have actually got some replies, because, you know, these websites aren't quite as popular. They're not receiving quite as much email, et cetera, et cetera. So, I mean, yes, if you were able to get a link from a high DR or high DA website, that would suit you very well, potentially. However, it's better to get some than none, right? So there's a bit of a balance that needs to be struck, and a little bit of testing, I suppose, that ought to occur. However, one caveat that I might share is I find there are less people doing outreach to the bigger sites, because I think they assume the bigger sites aren't going to get back to them, because they are exactly. So the actual pool of emails that you're contending with, and email is generally the sort of standard way that we, at least,
a request would come through.
Yeah, would come through. The pool is smaller at the top. So you're actually competing against less people at the top. So if you have, and we'll go through sort of your value proposition in a little bit, but if you have something of value to offer these big sites, then I would not fear.
Okay. So one of the other sort of related questions to that is, if I get a backlink on one of these sites, then do I go back to that same site and ask for a regular article or, you know, regular exchange? Or is it better that I source new domains instead of more links from the same domain that I just won?
That is a super good question. And typically my answer would be, as far as I know, a second link from the same site has diminishing returns from an SEO perspective. I've never seen a piece of data to say one way or the other, but that's sort of my understanding of how it works. However, there's more to all of this than just SEO, right? It may be that your community,
actually
your
link
buyers,
clicks that lead to business.
yeah, right. Like your
don't
people
forget
that actually might buy from you or come visit you may be on that website.
Right.
And so, a second link from that same site may be tremendously valuable because it's another opportunity for folks to discover you. So we weigh more than just SEO, of course.
I'll give one example there for folks who are here. And if you're familiar with Smith.ai, we work with a lot of small service-based businesses, but here's the thing. Like, if you've got a website and you find that you're referring leads to other businesses you recommend that you don't want to serve, they're not well qualified for you. Let's say that you are doing HVAC services only for commercial businesses, right? Commercial buildings, you don't do residential. You might get a bunch of residential leads saying, can you install a new AC in my home? And the answer is always no. I'm sure that you have a referral partner, and I'm sure you can think of other scenarios if that doesn't apply to you. On your website, you might have a list even of residential, high quality referral partners, even maybe just one or a few that you want to recommend. And maybe you point leads to that instead of having to email them a million links, the same, links every time. That is the sort of quality link that's probably going to result in new business for that other business. And you might ask for the same thing back from them. Yes, that's a backlink, but how many times that occurs is probably less important for your domain rank than it is for the weight of business that might come through there. Now, you obviously want all the ships to be lifted in the sea so that their sites are visible, so is yours. The more traffic that you have going to those websites, then everyone is happy. But it does matter if that link is expected to drive a quality lead or just a, sort of Google page view, so to speak, the Google bot sort of triggered click.
Yeah, that's a great example.
So let's think about, since we have, about 22 minutes left, how we actually go about using this information in building a campaign. You mentioned the email is really important. You start to collect the list of sites that you want to link to you. How do you go about sort of composing a campaign and just getting started totally from scratch, especially maybe when you're not comfortable reaching out, cold, so to speak, to other unknown website admins?
Yeah, absolutely. The first thing I would do is flex your own network. So if you're, say, an auto glass shop, for example, who do you know with websites, both locally and otherwise? So it may be that you buy your glass from a shop that is, whether it, located in your city or not, but you buy your glass from this one vendor and they have a website and they don't link to you. And so now it's up to you as a link builder or someone with a website that wants their website to be trusted to approach them and find a way to create value for them, because whether they're accepting content from you or accepting a testimonial or something, whatever it is, it takes effort for them to do that. It's usually not them who has to do it. So they have to reach out to their web designer or developer to make that happen, which may cost them money. So you've got to make it worth their while. And a couple ways that we do that, for example, are offering them, if they have a blog, for example, that appears somewhat active, we might offer them a piece of content that their customers, so customers like this glass shop, might be interested in reading. Something that this glass vendor could send via their email list or something like that in order to engage with their customers more often, which is always a good thing, right? So creating a piece of content for them is valuable and worth their time. Another and much easier way is to create a testimonial for them, especially if they already have testimonials on their website. Create a testimonial for them, write a testimonial for them, and have them post that to their website. It's something that's going to help them turn more visitors into customers. And presumably, if their customer is you, then they're trying to find other customers just like you. And by other customers reading your testimonial, they may more likely gravitate towards purchasing from that glass vendor. So taking 5 minutes to write a testimonial and send it to a vendor you already know takes no time. Very, very quick. And in that testimonial, typically they link to the website that is responsible for that testimonial. So easy backlink. So vendors are an easy one. Another one just maybe other business owners or other business professionals that you know in complementary spaces or otherwise. It can be local. It doesn't have to be local. Local is a bonus. The more relevant a link is, the better, whether that means locally relevant or sort of relevant in topic. That is, you're getting a link from another sort of glass related or service business related website, for if we're going to continue using the glass shop example. So who do you know with websites? Reach out to all of them. This way it's not cold. This way the chances you're going to get some success are high. And family of family, like everybody has a pretty big network if they really put their head to it. So I would start there. It's always nice to get some quick wins, right? Because it can be real discouraging to try something new, send out a bunch of emails and get 0 responses. Chances are you're going to quit. But if you can get, 5, 6, 10 links from just the people you know, and all of a sudden you see your rankings in Google improve, you'll have the steam you need to try something new and fail at it a couple times, because if you can do it, what that might mean for your rankings and potentially traffic and potentially phone calls. So I would just try to use your personal network first before jumping into sort of more traditional sort of SEO methods.
Mm-hmm. Now, if you are going to sort of branch out, I know there's a lot of interest in link building strategies that involve, .org, .gov, sort of nonprofits and schools, educational organizations. Why is that? And are they easier to connect with and sort of get fulfillment from? Or is that, a better quality sort of, or both?
Well, there's a lot of them accept money, right? Mm-hmm. And so with a donation, sometimes comes a little give back. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of these, let's say a soccer team, for example, with a website, local soccer team with a website, oftentimes they mention who are their donors on their website, and they link to their donors, because a lot of times their donors or their bigger donors tend to be other local business, or they tend to be local businesses. Mm-hmm. And so, they want to make sure that they're supporting these businesses because these businesses are supporting them, right? Mm-hmm. And so, yes, local organizations, be it charity organizations, sport organizations, all that kind of thing, often have websites, often link to their donors, and are often trusted websites. Sometimes they're smaller websites that haven't done a heck of a lot, but there is definitely something to be said about getting a link from if you're a local business, getting a link from a local website that is a website that serves the same area that you serve in one form or another. So yes, I would most certainly to go that route, especially if you know somebody that works for an organization like that. And remember that that person that works for that organization knows other organizations. right? They're in contact with other organizations. So if you said, hey, I'd like to give to another organization, do you know any of any? They say yes. Could you intro me to that organization and CC me on that email? Then you have a shoe in. It's much easier to approach that other organization. And so you just kind of work from there. You do one, and then, hey, can you introduce me to two people? Okay, you reach out to that person, reach out to that person, and so on. So there's a lot that can be done without ever having to really be any sort of SEO or really practice any crazy SEO tactics. You can really do a lot just by using your own personal network. Business networks are a good one. Public speaking, usually there's lots of public speaking courses out there. Some communities are served by meetup.com. Like there's a lot of sort of local chapters, local organizations that advertise on websites like Meetup. So that might be a good way to figure out what's going on locally, who has websites and who you can reach out to. Schools are a good way as well. Schools have teams, schools have reasons to accept donations. So that's another way to go. So if you've got a kid who goes to a school, well, then you've got a good reason to reach out to that school, right? Or if you know a parent and they've got a kid who goes to school, and so on and so forth. So yeah, lots of ways to go about getting backlinks.
So let me ask, and then we'll go into maybe a couple pitfalls and start to wrap up. I want to make sure you have a chance to talk about, Loginix, but when we think about the local service businesses, rather than a big SaaS company in Silicon Valley with tons of money to pour into link building, what is your sort of like target and results? What metrics are you looking for, and where is there a threshold where you feel like that's a really good early benchmark? Like if I'm a small business owner, should I be looking for 10 in the next month, in the next 6 months? Am I looking at 10 total or 50 total? And what should I expect to pay for that?
Yeah, that's it's a really tough question to answer without using tools. Again, I mentioned SEMrush and Ahrefs. Just start with one.
You can
honestly.
even use Smith.ai or whatever is easier for you to say. Like,
yeah, fair enough.
You've got a starting point of 50, let's say. I mean, we're at 71, but let's say we're at 50. And let's say that Smith.ai is just a local receptionist service, right? Like we're not a big SaaS company, we're just a local service.
Sure.
Based in Palo Alto. Where would we go from there?
Well, the way I would typically approach it is I always use one of these tools and figure out what my competitors are doing. So the competitors that are ranking well for the keywords that I want, the search phrases that I want to rank for, what are they doing? How many links from how many websites do they have? Are those websites, do they appear to be high quality websites? What do those links look like? Are they coming from content or blog comments, social? Like what is the composition of those links? And basically, when we look at what is succeeding, it gives us some clues as to what we need to do to succeed, right? And they're kind of like breadcrumbs. And if we can sort of create a map of what is presently working for the keywords that we care about, then it will inform what we need to do to be successful as well. So that's maybe a little bit more of a kind of a complicated approach. If you're a local business and you don't have access to these tools or don't necessarily want to pay for these tools, because they can be a little bit expensive and there is a little bit of a learning curve. Again, these metrics that these tools provide are available in our dashboard for free. So there is that option. But, if I'm a local business, generally the competition isn't too crazy unless we're talking about Miami personal injury lawyers, at which point, if you're a personal injury lawyer in Miami, you probably are better off just speaking with an SEO. But if you're, say, a local glass shop in a city of, let's say 100,000 or less or 200,000 or less population, I wouldn't worry so much about the number. Just go get one. And then once you get one, go get two. And then go get four. Don't worry too much. And don't expect to see, and it's like handing out business cards. It's like every time there's an opportunity to bring up your business, you bring up your business because there might be an opportunity to get a new customer there. So it just becomes sort of hey, do you have a website? Hey, do you know somebody with a website? That kind of thing. It just becomes habitual, like you say. And again, I wouldn't worry about the numbers. I would just make it a habit, and don't expect to see results like rankings right away. There's, like I said, it's a link building is a big piece of the puzzle, but there's also on-site optimization, which is another big piece of the puzzle, and one without the other doesn't work. So it's not just link building, even though link building is a big piece. But again, don't be discouraged. Get 1, get 2, get 4, and you will see results soon enough.
I will say this also, that I've noticed in my past work at other companies. As soon as you start doing this and you say, look at what someone else has done, or look at this article that I wrote for this other site, it's a lot easier to say, let me write one for you, or why don't you join, this page with these other sort of brands mentioned here, or can I join your page? The more that you demonstrate sort of past wins, the more that a company is going to say yes to you for your future wins. So, the sooner you start, the better, because just like any review or testimonial, you have to start with the first review to get to that 100th review, right? And people are more likely to contribute to something that already seems alive and well.
100%. That's a terrific piece of advice. Absolutely. I had a little bit of a relationship with Smith.ai, but when we reach out to websites, we always offer comparable samples of content that we've written. And by comparable, I mean on similar websites. Maybe not necessarily your competitors, for example, but we would show you other websites that you're going to likely recognize that we've written for you, because right away, you can see, okay, actually they can write. Oh, wow, this is an actual valuable piece of content.
That's how I've trained my team to evaluate.
100%. And so you're so much more likely to get a yes when you're able, and I do that in my first email. That's a part of my first email. Here are some examples. Here are some proof that I can do what I say. And it's also kind of social proof. Oh, those guys published your content? Oh, okay. Well, if they did it, then you must not be too weird, right? So right. It's a good place to start. And I would just add one more thing to that. When doing outreach, always come from a place of value. Don't send an email saying, oh, hey, I really like your website. The design is really good. Can I write content for you? Everybody's asking that exact same thing. So do a little bit of thinking. Hey, what might this piece of content mean for them? If that's what the approach I'm going to take, like, what does that mean to them? How are they monetizing? How can I write specifically for their user? What have they not written about? And just try and be more thoughtful. And we mentioned that email is a great way to go about it. It doesn't have to be the only way. Written doesn't have to be the only way. For some websites, we've grabbed our, myself or one of my team members will grab our phone and we'll record a quick Loom video and send it off via a DM on Twitter. Say, hey, I've written for blah, blah, blah. I've noticed that you haven't written about this topic yet. I would love to fill that gap for you. And it can be a 10-second video and it can make all the difference.
And you have to imagine that there is a cost that you're saving for that brand. And when we accept guest posts that are of significant value, that we see a strategic relationship beyond just the link building, as we saw with you, Adam, there's something really interesting that happens where you have a trade-off of how much is it going to cost me to go find an expert, pay them to write a great article, and then vet it myself. Whereas, if it's being offered to you and the quality is really high, and you expect that they have an editor who reviews their work before it's sent to you, you actually have a really substantial article on a topic that you hopefully want to rank for. And that's the sort of vetting process that you're going through in your pitching. And that actually is saving me, the head of marketing, from going out and creating that content myself, as long as I have the assurance that it's original content, et cetera. Now, the other sort of strategy that often comes up, Adam, is just like the more low threshold, low friction. I saw that this is not linked or a broken backlink in an article. Can you update that phrase or that broken link? Here's a really good link that I've got that you could use instead, so that your readers are not, sort of left in the dark. Does that hold as much value? Like, is the refresh sort of like search happening to the degree that Google will recognize an updated link like that?
That's a super question. Generally, if you found a website that appears to be of some trust, of some value, then chances are that Google's coming back to that article. May not be right away, but chances are within a week or two, Google's going to come back to that article and discover that something has changed. Now, the beautiful thing about, and again, a lot of things in SEO we don't have concrete proof of. So a lot of it is just experience-based. Or just theoretical, like this would make sense because X, Y, and Z. The beautiful thing about a piece of content that already exists is it may have already gained some links to it. Mm-hmm. It may have gained some comments. It may have, it has existed, has increased in value versus a brand new piece of content, which, even though it's going on a trusted website, it's not necessarily a trusted piece of content. It hasn't matured. And so its value is sort of at its least at that time when it's a brand new piece of content. Whereas if it's an existing piece of content, it may be at its like peak value. Mm-hmm. So again, as none of this is black or white, it's not concrete, but there's definitely a lot of value in getting links in content that already exists on a website. It just can be, it requires a little bit more doing, I find.
So, I mean, a lot of learning here today. And I think a lot of barriers that are sort of broken down to feel like this is accessible to anyone who wants to be doing link building. If you feel pretty spread thin and you want to work with you and your team, Adam, how would someone go about doing that? And what services are you currently offering, and to whom?
So our website is probably the best bet, quite honestly, loginix.com. We serve mainly agencies and in-house teams. So SEO agencies and the in-house teams of companies that would have an in-house team, have their own marketing team kind of. So it tends to be slightly more established companies. However, we do see a lot of small, medium-sized businesses as well. And our dashboard, where services are purchased, is very comprehensive. There are lots of different options in there for somebody who kind of knows what they're looking for. And it's very a la carte. There's no retainers or anything like that. You just get what you need. So if you want, this link or that link, or, this many citations or this piece of content, that can all be taken care of in our dashboard. So there is that option. There is a more managed option. If you don't want to have to learn what a backlink is, mind you, you're already here, so now you do. But if you just don't want to mess with any of that, there is a managed option where we would put together, a strategy for you and see that strategy is carried out. And you can just email me about that, adam@loginix.com. Frankly, you can email me about anything. My inbox is wide open. And
all right, I'm putting your
Am I going to regret this?
in there. I don't think so. Not with this crew. So thank you so much. I know that we're up on our time, but Adam, really appreciate you diving in so deeply on this subject and sharing your hour with us. So I will share the follow-up notes with everyone and provide Adam's contact information, a few links to Ahrefs and SEMrush, so you can check those out if you're interested, but definitely check out the Loginix dashboard, and feel free to email if there are any future questions. We're happy to maybe get Adam to write another blog post for us and he can cover more. So anyway, have a wonderful rest of your day. Adam, thank you so much for your time. Thanks for joining us.
Likewise. Thank you. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.